So the worst part about being a technical professional is dealing with the interviews. Tech interviews suck. And they suck for a lot of reasons. One of them is that every company does them differently. Some companies do leak code. Some companies do take-home tests. Some companies don't make you write any code at all. And now that AI is on the scene for both employers and candidates, things are about to get worse, and that means that things need to change. I'm Eric Wise. I am a 20-plus year enterprise software architect. I am an educator and an entrepreneur. And that means that I work with both candidates who are trying to break into the field, and I work with companies that are trying to assess these candidates. So today I just want to take some time and talk about my thoughts about how AI is going to substantially change the way we interview developers. Now let's talk about what's happening in the market right now. Applicant tracking systems, or ATS, is something that's been around for a while, and employers have gradually been adding more friction to these systems. They're having machine learning and AI tools go through your resume, look at all the keywords, and they're trying to filter out as many candidates as they can without involving a human, because human time is expensive. Well, now that AI tools are cheaply available and readily available to candidates, we are now seeing an increase in market tools that allow candidates to spam resumes. So you can upload a version of your resume, the AI can go out and grab a whole bunch of job postings, it'll tweak your resume, it'll write your cover letter, and it will just spam resumes out to all the employers. Now, this is a big problem for the employers because now the ones that are hiring, they put up a job ad, and within 24 hours, they get a couple thousand applicants. And no human can go through all these. And then when they start digging through the candidates that make it through the filter, they start finding that very few of them are actually qualified to do the job. So now what's happening? Employers will start adding more friction. They'll start adding AI detection, which doesn't really work. And those friction points will continue increasing, which will continue frustrating job seekers, which will lead to job seekers using more tools. And this just becomes an arms race between candidates and employers. And the worst part about this is that qualified candidates are getting buried in a sea of people who are not qualified. And this ends up bringing hiring to a stop. Now, I have a friend who works for $1 billion software company, and they work in the payroll industry. And one of the things he was telling me is that right now, they are not accepting candidates for technical positions off of the open market. They are only accepting candidates that are referrals from people who are already working at the company. Now, this isn't scalable, it's not a long-term solution, but it really highlighted for me how much of a problem this is, that a company would stop using their ATS system because this is such a big deal. And this arms race is a big frustration to me as a tech professional, because what's happening now is the tech companies are selling employers tools to do all the filtering. And then they're turning around and they're selling candidates tools to beat the filters. And the only one who wins in this situation are the companies selling the tools. Now, as an example, one of my students at Foundry sent me this screenshot. Now, this comes from LinkedIn. This is somebody I personally know, and it's real. You can see here that the AI tool said you have none of the skills required for this particular job. However, the candidate tool, the AI-powered job assistant, says you should totally apply for this job. And this kind of underscores the problem, because in this case, we're talking about LinkedIn, and they charge employers to post these jobs. And they also want candidates to buy their premium so that they can better execute a job search, and then it's giving bad information like this. This is a huge problem, and it's not being addressed. And having difficulties in finding, attracting, and qualifying good candidates is not something that's new. This has been a problem for a long time. And it actually started with colleges and higher education. Like, let me just tell you about GPAs. When I receive a resume as a hiring manager, I don't even look at the GPA because it's meaningless. On one side, I don't know how hard your classes were. I don't know if those classes were weighted. And if you're in a country where that doesn't happen, weighted classes in America, colleges run on a 4-point system. So if you get an A, you get 4 points. But in a weighted class, you get 5 points. So if you have a couple weighted classes and somebody else doesn't, you can end up with a better than 4.0 GPA. And on the hiring side, when it's just rolled up into one number, that makes it really useless as a metric. And it doesn't just mean high GPAs. Your GPA can be lowered because in college they make you take a bunch of electives. And I don't care if I'm hiring a programmer if they got a C in their theater class. That has nothing to do with the job that I'm asking them to do. So this credential inflation is a problem. And then we add on to that these AI issues with the filter manipulation. And it's not just the ATS system and the candidate submission, it's also now appearing during the interview. Now here's something I found, it's called finalround.ai, and let me be clear, I am not endorsing this product, it's just one of many that I found. And the reason I went looking for this is because I was giving a talk at a big technical conference, and I'm in a room full of senior software developers, hiring managers, executives, and I asked the room, I said, how many of you have caught candidates cheating using AI during the interview? And over 80% of the people raised their hand. And these tools aren't even well known yet, but finalround.ai, it'll listen to the interview because AI tools can now understand audio, they can have video, they can interpret your screen. So it's actively looking at what's happening in the interview, and it starts feeding candidates answers. Behavioral questions, technical questions. If you're given a code problem, it will help you solve the code. And you can even set in the options what languages you would like to solve the code in. And the result of this is that deception in qualifications is going to go way up. And one of the other repercussions of this is that because these AI tools have so much data on things like leak code, and because take-home tests can just be given to an AI, none of those things are going to be relevant in the long term for interviews. So we need to talk about how interviews need to change based on these AI tools existing, because even on the job, these tools are here and they're here to stay. But before we move on, let me just talk about cheating and deception in interviews. Because right now, I don't really blame candidates for reaching for these tools. We have made technical interviews so high stakes because of these ATS filters and things like that. I see people every day talking about how they send out hundreds of applications to only get a couple interviews. And when we have that as a system, as a reality, it makes the stakes of those interviews so high that even good people are going to be tempted to cheat, especially when they see other people cheating and being successful with it. And that's going to be a big problem that needs to be solved. Now, based on AI being here and fundamentally changing the way software development is being done, we need to talk about what we are looking for in candidates given that AI tools are here. Now, there's a lot of doomsayers out there right now. They're talking, oh, developers are cooked, it's going to replace all software developers. Most people who are senior and very experienced in the field, we're not seeing that at all. In my own personal work, AI can maybe do 15% of the code, and it's usually the boilerplate stuff that's pretty easy to do anyway. Anytime we get into domain-specific things or complicated things or things that aren't publicly available with lots of code samples, the AI tools fall down, and they fall down pretty hard. But even if AI tools go from 15% to 85% of the code generated, That means that the coders are going to have to be able to finish what I call the last mile, that last 15%. And chances are that is not going to be the easy stuff. So anyone out there who's learning to code right now and they think that they can just use AI as a crutch and not actually learn to code, I gotta warn you, it's gonna be really hard for you to find employment if you are incapable of finishing that last mile. So the first thing we are going to select for in technical interviews is, do you have the coding skills to pick things up and finish where AI left off? Because you're not allowed to ship 85% of a feature, and you're not allowed to fix 85% of a bug. You have to be able to finish those tasks. Now, the other thing we're going to look at is system level understanding. And if you're a beginner, if you're early in the career, this is one of the things that beginners are very weak at. But let me tell you something about AI tools. They lack the context to understand all of the business decisions and how all these things come together and what systems we have in place and how they should work together. That system design, that system level understanding is going to be a requirement for all future candidates, because that's where the humans are going to continue to add value, where the AIs don't. And branching into that, we also need to talk about security awareness, because I can tell you from personal experience, just because the AI code works does not mean it is secure. And I have frequently had AI tools put things into my code base that I've caught that did not use encryption correctly, did not secure keys correctly, used outdated algorithms. So having an awareness of how to appropriately configure and use security in applications is going to be a critical thing that human developers are going to have to do, even if AI writes substantially most of the code. And besides security, we also need to talk about performance optimization. Again, just because the AI produces code that works doesn't mean that it's scalable, doesn't mean that it performs well. And this is particularly important in today's world because we use a lot of cloud services for hosting our applications. And what I tell people is, well, how does the cloud charge you for your application usage? And it's all based on resources. How much CPU, how much memory, how many virtual servers are you spinning up to handle these loads? All of that is charged for. So if you're just using an AI tool and you're just copy pasting all that code into your code base and it's poor performing, then your cloud costs are going to go way up. And that is not going to be a good thing. And it's not something that the cloud providers are incentivized to help you with. Now, another thing I want to talk about here really quick is product and user experience. Because one of my hopes as a technical professional is that if AI does make us more productive, maybe we can spend more time making the software easier to use and making it make more sense to users. Because I'm sure that everybody out there in the audience has used some software that performs a task, but the way you use it, the way it's configured, the way things are displayed is really bad. And I think in the future, as AI continues to improve and AI frees up some developer time, I think developers that are good at user experience and good at product design and product management are going to be far more valuable than those that aren't. Now let's talk about code verification skills, because reading code is a lot harder than evaluating code that you've written. And if AI continues to write more of our code, we are going to have to spend more time reading and verifying the code. And I can tell you, as somebody who uses these tools in my day-to-day, that reading code and finding obvious errors like syntax errors and things like that is very easy. But reading and reviewing code where something is missing is much more difficult. So being able to design good test plans and being able to quickly read, review, and verify what's coming out of the AI tools is going to be a key part of the future job of software developers. And now we need to talk about your communication skills. And this is something I've been beating the drum on for almost my whole career. Being able to communicate effectively has always been important to being a top tier technical professional, because you need to meet with people who are not technical and explain technical concepts to them in language they understand. And this is no different in an AI assisted world, because what is a prompt? A prompt is you explaining to an AI tool what you would like it to do. And let me assure you, as somebody who uses these tools every day, that the better your prompt, the better the output from the AI will be. That means structuring your thoughts in a way that makes sense. That means using the proper terminology. Sometimes it means even creating code snippets and tests and examples to give the AI tool to help it produce the output. And if you're not capable of good writing and good communication skills, you are going to be severely limited as a professional when you're working with AI tools and the humans who are stakeholders who depend on you to produce a working product. And all of this together, one of the most important things that you need to develop is a growth mindset. The field has always changed. I remember being young, we didn't have IntelliSense. We didn't have the internet. I had to read a book, and through trial and error, I learned how to do things in code. Fast forward to today, I'm 100 times more productive than I used to be just because of the experience and the tooling that is now available to me. And these tools are very early. We've only had them for a couple years. They are going to continue to evolve, and there will be new products, and the workflows are going to change. And having a growth mindset means that you have the confidence that you can adapt to these new environments, and you spend actual time trying to grow, learn, and evolve to keep current with the market. If you're somebody who doesn't do that or doesn't like to do that, this rapid pace of change is going to eventually end up with you being in a very tough place to be in. Now, we spent some time talking about what we want from the candidates. Now let's talk about the employer side. So if you are involved in the interview process, here are some things that I think you need to consider. Now, the first one is embracing AI as a tool, not as a threat. People often ask me, should you be allowed to use AI tools in the interview? And I say yes. And one of the main reasons I say that is because one of your jobs as an interviewer is to figure out a person's capabilities and how they think and how they approach problems. Well, what is a prompt? A prompt is a window into the candidate's view of how they're looking at a problem, what they know, and how they think. So I can look at somebody's prompt and I can determine, are they using the right keywords? Do they understand the problem? Do they understand the pros and cons of different solutions? And when the code comes out and they're reviewing it, I get a good window into how they review code. Do they notice shortfalls? Do they notice performance problems, security issues, all of those things? So I see prompting as a way to look into the candidate's brain, which is what every hiring manager should want when they're evaluating candidates. So I don't mind if people use AI tools in the interview as long as we're transparent about it and we can watch it happen. And another thing I tell employers is that they should be focusing on process and authentic technical discussions over memorization. Because if these AI tools continue to improve, I can tell you right now, I don't go to Stack Overflow anymore. The AI tool is my first stop for documentation, for exploring ideas. over internet search. So that means that memorization in the future is less valuable. We want to know that you understand how to make good engineering decisions and that you can use these tools to get you to a place where you don't need memorization. You're using them to fill in the blanks and be more productive. Now, we don't want candidates just sitting there and regurgitating whatever the AI tools are telling them. So there will be a need for in-person interviews. Those need to come back. Remote interviews are really hard. Maybe there will end up being a situation where people will go to test centers like they do today for other credentials, but you are going to need to be put in a controlled environment where you can have a conversation with somebody. And through those conversations, without the AI tool assistance, we will be able to better evaluate candidates for whether or not they're actually qualified and how much they bring to the table without the tool. Because let me tell you, in IT, I do not believe that prompter is going to be a real job. And let's dig into these assessments. So if you're an employer, you're trying to evaluate candidates. One of the good things about AI tools is that they can help us build better assessments. So instead of giving out lead code problems and trivia problems that nobody's using on the job, you can now create small tasks that are job relevant. And that's what employers should have been doing all along if they wanted the best candidates. Your technical tasks should map to actual skills that you need on the job. That's crazy, right? I'm an innovator here, right? The other thing I want employers to think about is pair programming, and specifically pair programming with the use of AI tools if you allow those in the company. Because again, if somebody is pairing with a candidate and they get to see the prompts and the way they approach the problems, they are going to learn a lot about the qualifications of that candidate. We also want to talk about that system design because that is becoming more important. And I can tell you, as somebody who works with candidates and employers, you rarely see system design discussions outside of senior level interviews. And I think that the junior and mid-level developers are going to have to get better at this because we can't be just shoveling AI code into our code base without thinking about the repercussions to the rest of the system. Also, I want employers to think about doing code review exercises. Again, AI tools start producing more percentages of the code. Developers are going to spend more time reviewing those codes. So can you put code in front of a developer and have them explain to you what's good about it, what's bad about it, what would they change, is it formatted correctly, can they detect any issues with performance or security or user experience? Those types of discussions and that type of thinking is going to be really valuable in your candidate selection going forward. That also means being able to debug the code, because AI will often introduce subtle bugs. I had an issue the other day. I used AI to generate some database update code, and it wrote all the code correctly, but it forgot to call save. So then I'm testing things out, I'm entering the form, and the data isn't showing up in my database. And what's going on? The process of watching somebody go through that and fix those issues is going to tell you whether they are qualified to be a professional in your organization with these tools enabled. And finally, one of the most important things going forward outside of the tech skills is going to be domain experience. So if you're hiring and you're a bank, or you're in the insurance industry, or you're in medicine, again, the quality of the prompts determines the quality of the output. So you need to start assessing people for how much they understand about your domain. And if you're a technical professional, I think one of the things that is going to benefit your career is picking a couple verticals and learning those domains really well so that you can be more effective with those with those UX decisions, with those system design decisions in that area. And if you're a junior, if you're a beginner, entry level, this is one place where you're going to have some trouble because that is really hard to develop without job experience. So once you get into a domain, I suggest that while you're learning all the technical stuff, you also take the time to really understand the business, because that's going to make you more valuable in the long term. Now let's dig into the actual interview where you're using AI tools, and it's open, it's transparent. Both the hiring manager and the candidate are aware that these tools are being used. So what are some red flags I would be looking for if a candidate is using AI tools? These kind of things I would disqualify somebody from a job for. Now, the first one is if AI is producing code and the candidate isn't able to explain the code or the design decisions behind the code. That's going to be a big problem because we don't need people just copying, pasting whatever comes out of the tool without being able to critically think about it and evaluate it. The second red flag I'd be looking for is over-reliance on the tools for what I would call basic programming concepts. If you're coming to me for an entry-level position and I set you down to pair program with you, and the first thing you do is ask the AI tool how to write an if statement or a for loop, I'm going to be really concerned about your overall qualifications. You should be using AI to help generate things that are boilerplate, and you should be able to do that in a way that shows that you understand what the code structure should look like. Now, another thing that's going to be a problem is that when we're talking about AI, is if you don't have a reality-grounded grasp of what the AI tools are good at and what they're not good at. It's going to be really hard for me to give a candidate a job if they think that AI can do 100% of the things, because that tells me that they haven't been working on any tough problems. It tells me that they haven't been doing anything complicated, and it tells me that they probably don't know how to push AI to a point where it runs into those issues that senior developers experience on a day-to-day basis. And the final red flag, and this is something that will immediately disqualify you in an interview, is if you share sensitive information with the AI tools without consideration. Any candidate that, puts a security key or a password or something like that into the AI tool, I'm going to have one eyebrow way raised, and that is probably going to disqualify you immediately from the interview, because a lot of these tools run in the cloud, and sending passwords and secure information in your code or even outside the code to those cloud tools is going to be a disqualifying factor, and it should be. Now, what about the green flags? These are the things that if I'm working with a candidate and they're using AI tools, these are the things that make me happy. Now, the first one is that they openly can discuss how they plan on using the tool and how they're going to use it in the process of the task that I've given them. And the second is that process. I want to see candidates that focus on the process and the big decisions and guide the AI as a tool towards a good solution. I want them to step back and really show me that they understand when they can use AI to speed them up because something is boilerplate or repetitive, and when they should dig in and take a little bit more control because something is tricky or maybe critical to the process. And in all of that, they better be able to explain and modify the AI suggestions. So when the AI starts spitting out that code, one of the things I'm looking at as a hiring manager is if the AI puts something out that isn't secure or isn't performant or maybe isn't following the process from the prompt, because that does happen, they hallucinate. I'm looking at how quickly does the candidate see the problem and how proactively can they react to it. I am way more impressed with somebody who looks at AI output and says, ooh, that doesn't look right. and they go in and they can preemptively kind of fix it, versus somebody who just copies and pastes the whole thing in there, runs into a bunch of problems, and then goes back and forth asking the AI, just feeding the error messages in and asking the AI to fix its own problem. I want to see people that use it as a tool, not as a crutch. And especially with AI code, you need to be mindful of the user experience, the performance, and the security. And the more a candidate can talk to me about that while they're working with the tool and demonstrate that, the more impressed I am going to be. And that ultimately means if you're in that technical interview, I'm looking for you to have the discipline to think about testing and verification when you're using those AI tools. You really should not be on the job generating code from an AI if you don't have a plan for testing and verifying its correctness. And those are the things I want to see from candidates that are using the tools in the interviews. Now, I realize that I covered a lot of stuff in this video, and I tried to include both the candidate and the employer's perspective because I am fortunate enough to work with both sides of that fence. But because things are changing quickly, I don't have all the answers. I know that the things I talked about in this video are working really well for me and my employer partners, but I want to hear from your experiences because I'm still forming my opinions and I'm still building new processes around these tools and the new reality that we face. So if you have opinions or observations from your personal experiences, I want to hear about them. So leave a comment below. I'll be sure to read every one of them. Happy coding.